The alien woman leaned in close. What she said still haunts me. It started with a cup of coffee, or rather the desperate fumbling failure to produce one. Ethan Cross slammed the malfunctioning synth brewer with the flat of his palm. The machine belched out a puff of steam, and a noise not unlike a depressed whale. The cup beneath it, trembling from the vibration, remained tragically empty. Perfect, Ethan muttered, stranded in the vast, unfailing belly of space with a ship that farts instead of brews. What's next? Talking toilets. A chirp from the cockpit console interrupted his bitter monologue. Incoming transmission priority. Emergency distress signal source. Unregistered vessel. The voice was female. Crisp, synthetic, and just a little too cheerful about doom. He trudged forward, the soles of his boots thudding against the aging deck of the Jezebel, his midsize cargo hauler with more quirks than legal upgrades. The transmission crackled through again, weak but insistent, like a child tapping at the edge of sleep. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Unregistered vessel in the belt, he muttered to himself. Could be pirates, could be a ghost ship, could be someone trying to offload a cursed fridge from the third moon of Grouse. Again, he sighed, and I was going to fix the coffee machine today. He punched in a trajectory adjustment, angling toward the source outside the viewport. The stars shimmered like static over black glass. The asteroid belt loomed, a swarm of tumbling shadows, and nestled inside the wreck it drifted like a corpse, angular and strange, a vessel of unfamiliar design, long and segmented like the fossil of a cosmic insect. No signal beyond the beacon, no life signs, no reason to go in. Ethan naturally went in. Docking required more profanity than finesse, but he made it as he stepped through the airlock in full EVA gear. His boots touched down on the derelict with a hollow clang that echoed too long. The corridor lights flickered sporadically, casting shadows like reaching fingers. The air was thin but breathable. He deactivated his helmet. Hello, he called out. If anyone's still alive and has coffee, I come in peace. Also mildly annoyed, silence answered. The ship's layout was disorienting, all spirals and smooth walls, like it had been grown rather than built. He passed a row of stasis pods. Most were empty. One was cracked and dark inside, but the last one glowed faintly. She lay inside it. At first he thought she was human. Her skin was pale with a faint shimmer, as though starlight had settled just beneath it. Her hair a black so deep it seemed to eat light, floated gently in the pod's field. But her ears, they were long, tapering back from her head like swept wings, delicate and curved, and she was awake. Her eyes opened slowly, silver irises swirling like twin galaxies. Her gaze locked on Ethan, unblinking. A voice, not a sound, not quite, brushed the edge of his consciousness, a whisper just behind his ear, like someone had leaned in to share a secret he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. You can hear me, the whisper said, not a question, a fact. Ethan stumbled back. Whoa, okay, that's new. Are you telepathic, or did I just get space haunted? The pod hissed open, the stasis field collapsing in a crackle of light. She stepped out with surprising grace, bare feet silent on the metal floor. Up close, she was impossibly alien in the smallest ways, the way her pupils dilated horizontally, the precise symmetry of her features, the faint hum of energy that made the hair on his arms rise. I am Sileth, she said aloud now, her voice low and smooth, but still somehow echoing in his head. I chose you. Ethan blinked. Well, thanks for the vote of confidence, though if this is about saving the galaxy, you might want to aim higher. I once lost an argument to my own microwave. Sileth's expression remained unreadable. The future has fractured you, are its hinge. Oh, good, Ethan said, lifting both hands. It's never the guy with a stable job and a nice vacation plan, always the exhausted delivery driver with a back problem. She didn't laugh, not even a chuckle. He sighed. You're really going to make me take this seriously, aren't you? Without answering, she turned and walked deeper into the ship. Ethan glanced once at the open pod, then after her. Of course she's Cryptic, of course, she walks away without answering anything space women man. Always with the drama still he followed as they moved through the wreck cath. Spoke of things Ethan barely understood, of fractures in time of echoes folding in on themselves of Earth as the locust of a converging crisis. She said she had escaped through one such fracture, pursued by beings that lived in probabilities and fed on futures. She said Ethan had been marked in every timeline she had seen. You have stood at the edge always, she told him. In some you ran, and when you stayed, they reached the core chamber where a strange device pulsed with failing power, a ring of crystalline nodes humming in a dying rhythm. Scath reached out to it, whispering a word in a language that sounded like wind through metal. The device shut down with a sigh, and suddenly Ethan felt lighter, as if gravity itself had blinked. He looked at her eyes, narrowing. So what happens now? You tag along while I finish my cargo. Run and we save the universe in our spare time. She tilted her head. There is no cargo. He frowned, checked his wrist terminal. She was right. The logs were gone, wiped clean. The Jezebel's route plan had been overwritten with new coordinates he didn't recognize. Oh, come on, he shouted to the ceiling. I'm not even getting paid for this. Silith stared at him, silent. He threw up his hands. Great, I rescue one whispering space elf, and suddenly I'm in an unpaid internship with Destiny. She blinked slowly. You are the fulcrum, Ethan groaned. I was this close to a nap and a hot meal, and somewhere in the dead ship's silent memory banks a timer began to count down. Ethan Cross had always thought space was quiet, peaceful, a grand cosmic silence broken only by the occasional malfunctioning coffee maker or your ship's AI muttering sarcastic remarks when you miscalculated a docking angle. But now, cruising through the void with an alien woman whispering existential crises into his mind like she was reciting bedtime horror stories, he realized space was only quiet when you weren't being hunted by time itself. Okay, Ethan said, packing across the narrow floor of the Jezebel's cockpit. Let's recap. I rescue a stranger from a haunted sardine can of a ship. She tells me reality is unraveling, the universe has a stalker, and I'm the chosen fulcrum. He turned to Silith, who sat in the co-pilot seat motionless. Her long pointed ears twitched ever so slightly, like radar dishes attuned to a frequency he couldn't hear. Her silver eyes stayed fixed on the stars ahead. She hadn't blinked in 6 minutes, which was frankly unnerving. Do you blink? Ethan asked, leaning closer. I do not need to, she replied flatly. Well, he said, throwing himself back into his seat, that's the single most unsettling sentence I've heard all week. Silith turned her head toward him slowly. You are handling this better than I expected. Ethan blinked. You expected worse. In several timelines you screamed, jumped out the airlock, or attempted to seduce me. He sputtered. Okay, 1, rude, and 2, how successful was I? She stared at him. Right, forget I asked. Outside the viewport, the stars she murmured unnaturally, not because of distance or lensing, but as if the constellations themselves had forgotten which patterns they were supposed to form. Scath had directed the ship toward a dead zone, a pocket of space where ships went missing and navigators got migraines just trying to chart a course through the kind of place you avoid unless you're suicidal, drunk, or apparently the chosen fulcrum of cosmic doom. Ethan examined the readouts. Okay, so this dead zone we're heading into, does it have a name? Something fun like the quantum jacuzzi? Or maybe the Don't Go Here Nebula? It is called the Sithari Echo, Silith said. Named for the being that once lived there and tried to rewrite the laws of time using its own dying breath. Ethan stared. Cool, definitely should have packed more snacks. As they entered the edge of the echo, the Jezebel's instruments began to twitch. Time seemed to lag. Ethan watched his hand move in slow motion, then snap back like a glitching hologram. The ship's AI Leonard chimed in over the speakers with a worried tone. Captain, we appear to be experiencing local temporal instability. My processors just lived through this moment 3 times and still can't make sense of your shirt. Ethan looked down. Hey, I like this shirt. Vintage Lunar Bowling League. It offends causality. Join. The club. Sileth reached out, placing her palm against a panel. The ship responded. Not with a beep or chime, but a harmonic pulse like a whale singing through a violin. Ethan jumped. Did my ship just purr? I am syncing it to the weave of local time. She said it will protect us somewhat. He didn't like the sound of somewhat. That word never led to anything good. It belonged in phrases like somewhat edible or somewhat explosive. They passed through the final layer of distortion and emerged into what could only be described as a graveyard for physics. Planets orbited in fragments, moons rotated like gears with no central mass, and in the distance, a storm of violet lightning crawled backward across the surface of a fractured star. Ethan swallowed. That's not how stars are supposed to work. Salith nodded. This place is what remains when a civilization decides it is above time. They became lost in their own futures, forgetting their past until there was nothing left but broken. Now fantastic. Ethan muttered, and we're here because there is an artifact, a key left by the ones who built the first time doors. We needed to track the source of the unraveling. It is guarded. Of course it is. They descended into the atmosphere of a derelict world that resembled a shattered jewel. Its surface was littered with crystal monoliths and husks of alien machines that warred softly, even though their creators had long since been swallowed by entropy. As they approached the artifact site, a temple-like structure half sunk into the cracked earth. Ethan noticed flickers of movement, shapes that didn't hold steady in space, shadows that leaned the wrong way, figures made of flickering static and sharp edges. Silas stopped, placing a hand on his chest. Her skin was cool. Her touch light. They are time eaters, echoes that consume futures to feed their mass. If they sense you, they will remember devouring you. Ethan's throat went dry. So I'm guessing they're not fans of knock-knock jokes. They do not laugh. Challenge accepted. They entered the temple. The walls pulsed like lungs, and the floor beneath them shimmered between stone and circuitry. The artifact was there, floating above a pedestal, a sphere of shifting metal wrapped in rings of pale energy. As Selith approached it, the time eater stirred. Ethan turned to her. Okay, we grab it and run, right? No, she said, you must take it. Only you. He groaned naturally. He reached for it. Time buckled. The world around him screamed in reverse. His hands became a dozen versions of themselves, and then silence. The artifact pulsed in his palm, and Ethan Cross felt something click. Eslith smiled faintly. You remember now, don't you? She asked. Ethan blinked. He did not. Everything but something. He remembered her in another place, another time. Okay, he said, voice dry. Let's go save the universe again. Silath whispered, and the temple shook as the time eaters screamed in forgotten voices. The artifact pulsed like a heartbeat in Ethan's hand, cool, metallic, and absolutely oozing with the kind of ancient power that made you wonder if you should be wearing gloves, goggles, or possibly a full-body radiation suit. But no, he was holding it barehanded because, of course, he was. They'd barely made it out of the temple before the time eaters had stirred, not in a running, snarling, claws and teeth way that would have been almost comforting. No, these things remembered you. Instead of chasing you, you didn't feel them coming. You felt like you were suddenly dead 5 minutes ago, and just now realizing it. Silith had guided them out with uncanny precision, leading Ethan through a maze of collapsing geometry and whispering shadows until they reached the Jezebel. She'd ordered the ship to lift off before Ethan even finished strapping in, now orbiting above a planet that had once argued with causality and lost. Ethan stared down at the artifact on the dashboard like it might sneeze, so he said slowly, what exactly does this thing do? Does it unlock a secret vault? Control time, summon a cosmic Uber? Sileth, cross-legged in the co-pilot seat, glanced at him. It reveals what everything. Oh good, I was just thinking The one thing missing from my day was everything. Silith didn't laugh. She never laughed. Ethan was starting to believe. Her species had evolved past humor, or maybe just way past the point of finding humans amusing, except once he could have sworn she smiled. Maybe could have been a muscle spasm. The artifact hovered gently, now suspended in a field of pale blue light that Silith had coaxed from the ship's auxiliary systems with a string of musical commands. Ethan had tried to replicate the sound with his voice and accidentally caused the microwave to enter combat mode. It hadn't attacked, but now it just made toast out of spite. What exactly is your species? He asked, turning to her. You look human mostly. Except the ears. No offense, but they're kind of elvish meets Tesla coil. Silith turned her head, letting the soft cabin light trace the elegant curve of her ears. My people are called the eerily. We are resonant beings. Resonant. We listen, we remember, sometimes we speak back. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So you're universal therapists? Therapists do not usually enter timelines to prevent their collapse through violent intervention. He grinned. You haven't met my therapist. Silith gestured, and the artifact flared. A thin beam of light shot outward and drew a shifting shape in the air. A holographic map of intersecting realities, branching timelines, and collapsing possibilities. It spun slowly. Beautiful and overwhelming, like a snow globe held by an angry god. This is what remains of the temporal lattice, she said. This fracture here, this tear, this is where it begins. Ethan squinted. It looks like a spaghetti noodle having a midlife crisis. That noodle is Earth, your Earth. 37 years from now. His humor dissolved. Wait, so it starts there, it ends there. The event echoes backward and forward. All futures converge on it, a point of irreversible divergence. Ethan stared at the map. What's the cause? Silith hesitated. That's the problem, she said softly. We don't know. There was silence for a moment, heavy with implications, and the distant humming of the artifact. Then Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. Of course you don't, because why make anything easy for me? I mean, I'm just a glorified space trucker. You want me to fix a broken multiverse? What's next? Teaching quantum entanglement to cats? I tried that once, she said absently. The cats were difficult. He snorted. You are messing with me. A faint twitch at the corner of her lips. Victory, as they prepared to jump toward Earth's orbit. The old broken future version. Ethan was struck by a realization that he couldn't shake. It wasn't just the artifact, it wasn't even the ship or the map or the looming sense that he'd done this before. It was her, the way she looked at him. Like he was something familiar, something she'd known too many times. Have we met? He asked. Silith looked at him, and for a second something ancient flickered in her gaze, a sadness that didn't belong to now. In several timelines, she said. You were different sometimes, better sometimes, gone. He blinked. So I'm your multiversal ex-boyfriend, more like a recurring plot device. Ouch. She reached out and touched the artifact again, and the stars shifted. The Jezebel dropped into high flux transit. The void stretching around them like hot glass. Space wasn't still anymore. It shimmered with motion, timelines trying to untangle themselves ahead of them. Earth, or some twisted echo of it, waited in the coordinates. But this wasn't the Earth. Ethan knew it was Earth after the fracture. Tell me one thing, he said. If we fail, what happens? Silith didn't hesitate. Everything dies slowly, then all at once. Well, Ethan muttered, remind me to put that on a t-shirt. She looked at him finally, with something human in her expression. You joke when you are afraid. It's that or scream, and I'm trying to keep Leonard from panicking. The ship's AI chimed in too late as Earth grew large and the viewport broken, glowing in ways planets shouldn't. Ethan stood staring down at the scarred blue marble. This is where it all went wrong, he whispered. No, Sigith said behind him. This is where we try to make it right. And the artifact pulsed again, whispering in 1,000 voices, waiting to remember the man it had chosen. The first thing Ethan noticed about the Fractured Earth wasn't the twisted sky or the massive tears running through the atmosphere like glowing scars of light. It was the sound, or the lack of it, through the ship's audio feed there was. Only static, as if the planet itself had forgotten how to hum. "Okay," he said, slowly staring out through the viewport. "So either the planet's gone full horror movie silent, or someone unplugged Earth and forgot to reboot it." Leonard, the ship's AI chirped in. "Audio sensors confirm the ambient noise level is equivalent to a vacuum, and also you're sweating more than usual. Would you like a stress nap?" "I don't nap under planetary collapse conditions," Ethan muttered. "That's how people end up waking up inside space coffins." Silith stood beside him, her expression unreadable. The artifact floated between them, casting strange shadows on her face. Even in the flickering light, she looked calm too. Calm. Ethan wasn't sure if it was confidence or centuries of exhaustion behind her eyes. The Earth they approached wasn't his Earth, not anymore. This was 37 years into a timeline where reality had been altered. Bits of cities floated in midair, held aloft by fractured gravity wells. Rivers ran in spirals, feeding into the sky, and in the upper atmosphere, colossal translucent rings pulsed with colors Ethan didn't have names for. "Is that the Eiffel Tower?" he asked, and squinting. "Yes," Silas said, "and that is also the Eiffel Tower, and that might be part of a sentient baguette dimension that collided with France." He blinked. "I knew bread would be the end of us." The Jezebel descended toward a pocket of relative stability, a crater in what was once New York, now suspended halfway between the past and future. Buildings flickered between architectural eras. Victorian facades, chrome spires, that weird brutalist phase people pretended to like. The ship settled on a platform made of concrete and what looked suspiciously like antique fax machines. As Ethan strapped on his utility vest, half actual tools, half just pockets for snacks, Sally touched his arm. "There is something you must know," she said. "This version of Earth, it remembers you." He paused mid-zip. "I don't like how you said that you have been here before. In another you, a different echo, and how'd that turn out?" She hesitated. "You did not scream. That is progress." Ethan groaned. "That's a low bar for heroism." They disembarked into a cityscape stitched together by time's poor memory. A flock of birds passed overhead in reverse, their cries echoing before they flapped. A traffic light blinked Morse code in dead languages. Somewhere someone was playing Bohemian Rhapsody backwards on a harp made of teeth. Ethan shivered. "It's like walking through a broken dream of the 1990s. They reached the remnants of a museum. If museums were prone to growing sentient vines and arguing with their exhibits, Salith guided them through the halls until they came upon a massive room where the air was thick like old syrup. Hovering in the center was a glowing orb, the same shape as the artifact Ethan carried, but enormous. Cracked and weeping threads of light into the floor around it. Time loop echoes flickered. Versions of Ethan, some older, some younger, paced, wept, screamed, or simply stared. Ethan took a cautious step forward. One of the echoes turned its head, locked eyes with him, and mouthed, "Don't trust the whisper." He froze. Did you see that?" Silith nodded, an echo of a warning. "They are fragments left behind. You must not become one." "That's reassuring," Ethan muttered, very motivational poster energy. "Don't become a shattered ghost of yourself." Smile. He approached the orb and held out the artifact. It resonated, instantly humming in the same key as the universe itself, or maybe just a really dramatic space opera soundtrack. Threads of light pulled from the orb to the artifact, and images exploded across the room. Visions. The first gate, a tower of light in Antarctica, a machine beneath the sea, a man with one eye and a silver voice whispering into the ears of children who age backward, and Ethan, older, eyes full of guilt, standing in front of a doorway made of numbers. "Weeping." Silith whispered, "The architect. He built the first time wound to fix something, but he failed." He started the unraveling Ethan swallowed, and now I have to stop what he started. Number, you must decide if it's worth stopping. Well, that's not ominous at all. They downloaded the data burst. And the orb dimmed like a candle, reliving its own death outside reality. Shook time eaters had arrived, drawn to the ripples of possibility. Ethan turned to Silith. We've got what we need. Let's bounce before the universe's worst fan club shows up. As they sprinted back to the ship, gravity forgot which way was down. Ethan was flung sideways into a mailbox that screamed when touched. Silith caught him mid-float and shoved him through the airlock. Back on board, Leonard chirped, new record for apocalyptic artifact retrieval. Would you like celebratory tea? Ethan gasped, catching his breath. Only if it doesn't try to time loop me. No promises. The ship launched upward as the earth behind them began to flicker in and out of visibility. Ethan turned to Silith, holding the artifact tight. So Antarctica, she nodded. That is where the doorway waits, where the architect began. Ethan slumped into his seat, exhausted but brimming with the kind of dread that came with knowing you were probably about to meet the guy who broke time like a second-hand blender. Okay, Leonard, he said, set course for the frozen end of the world. And as the ship turned toward the pole, Silith whispered something he almost didn't hear. Or the beginning. The Antarctic sky was wrong. Ethan had seen sunsets on the moons of Jupiter, flown through nebula storms that sang in ultraviolet, even once delivered cargo to a planet whose entire atmosphere was confetti and regret, but nothing compared to this. Above the polar wasteland, the sky swirled in slow spirals of colorless light, like the void had decided to try watercolors and then promptly set them on fire. A rift hovered just beyond the clouds, vast, motionless, and humming. Not visually, not audibly, no, it was a hum that vibrated in the soul, like someone had dialed the frequency of reality to deeply unsettling and left it there. The Jezebel hovered in silent suspension, the snowstorm outside irrelevant to her shields inside. Ethan checked the artifact once more. It no longer pulsed, no longer hummed, it simply waited. Okay, he muttered, tugging on a jacket lined with nanofibers and questionable optimism. Let's go knock on the door of time and ask for a refund. Kath stood at the ramp, her silhouette framed by the strange light. The wind tugged at her silver cloak, though she didn't seem to notice. She turned to him with her usual calm, her long ears twitching slightly in the breeze. You're different, she said quietly. I'm moisturized now, Ethan replied, part of my self-care routine. Her lips twitched again, that nearly smile he'd started to chase like a superstition, but there was no mockery in her eyes, only gravity, only time. You've changed, she said. You no longer run from the voice in your head. Yeah, well, Ethan, turns out the voice was just trying to help in the creepiest way possible. They stepped into the snow and it didn't crunch, it whispered. Eat. Footstep echoed slightly before it landed, as if the world was still deciding whether the present should exist at all. Ahead of them rose the doorway. It wasn't a door in the conventional sense, no hinges, no frame. Just a vertical slit of non-space floating above the ice, shimmering with unreadable symbols that flickered in and out of reality like a dying memory. Around it, shattered machines lay. Frozen ruins, remnants of the architect's first attempt to control the wound in time. Ethan approached, artifact in hand. The doorway responded with a low, resonant tone that vibrated his fillings. So he said, what are the odds this thing eats me the moment I walk through? Not zero, Silith replied. Fantastic, great. Love the odds. He turned back to her. You coming? She looked at the doorway, then at him. I've already passed through long ago in another life. This part is yours. He nodded. Of course it is. It's always about me. Can't let someone else be the protagonist for once. Ethan stepped through the doorway and everything changed. He didn't fall. He didn't fly. He existed in all directions at once. Time unraveled around him like bored cat with a ball of reality. Images flew by Ethan, as a child, as an old man, as a stranger, making the same choice 1,000 different ways. And then the Architect, he stood in a field of stars and broken clocks wearing a coat stitched from old equations and the color blue that didn't exist anymore. His face was lined with regret, his eyes tired from carrying too many possibilities. You made it, he said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Are you my long-lost multiverse dad or something? The architect laughed, quiet, genuine. Number just a man who tried to fix time and made it worse. Ethan stepped closer. Why me? Because you were always there in every timeline, the one constant, the only variable that chose what to listen. The artifact floated between them now, glowing like it finally remembered what it was. For you can reset it, the architect said. Close the wound, stop the unraveling. But the architect looked at him, sorrow in every wrinkle. You'll forget everything, Silith, the journey, even yourself, the you that makes this choice will end. Ethan looked at the artifact, then back at the architect, then up toward nothing. He thought of Silith's voice in his head. He thought of the quiet way she looked at him, like he mattered across centuries. He thought of Earth, not the broken one, not the futures that could be, but the real one with its dumb pigeons and loud vendors and kids who hadn't aged backwards yet. Okay, he said. He reached for the artifact, and just before the light swallowed him, he whispered, tell her I said thanks. For the whisper. When he awoke, he was in his bunk. The Jezebel was docked at an orbital station above a perfectly average, non-broken Earth. The sky was a predictable shade of blue. Leonard chirped cheerfully about overdue invoices and calorie intake. There was no artifact on the dashboard, no Silith. Ethan sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. Something inside him, not a wound, emissing like the shape of someone's voice when you've forgotten the words, but remember the warmth. He stood stretched and looked out the window. Below, Earth spun whole, untangled, a little boring maybe. He smiled, then a whisper, soft, almost like wind. You chose. He froze, turned, nothing there. But he smiled again, this time a little sad, a little proud. Damn right I did, he said, and somewhere far away in the folds of time, Silith watched him and remembered the end.